In this week's episode of PokeClass, I'm going to be counting down my top 5 deck choices for regionals coming up in the following weeks. Whether you're stuck for what to play or want to know what to expect to your event, then this episode is the one for you. Click the annotations above to skip to certain parts of the video or watch the whole thing to get the most out of the deck breakdowns. All this and more is in this week's episode of PokeClass, sponsored by Collector's Cash, your number one place to go for Pokemon sealed products and single cards. Check them out after the show at www.collectorscash.com. Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 91 of PokeClass, and today we're going to dive headfirst into regionals talk as they start this week, and it's going to be a pretty big part in any player's road to Worlds 2013 when trying to hit those 400 championship points and securing an invite. The main portion of this episode will be a countdown of my top 5 picks for regionals this time around, but first let's quickly talk about regionals as an event in this season's calendar. Just a quick note, I know that the first weekend of regionals has concluded this very evening in the US, but there are a lot of regionals coming up for the rest of the world, so this episode will still be very relevant. There are also even a lot of battle roads left to play over here in Europe too. So this year, there are 3 weekends of regionals in the US, increased again from last year with the idea that more players will be able to attend more events, which I guess can never be a bad thing. The main news, however, is that regionals and states now have 2 different championship point structures, whereas last year they are exactly the same. For this season, regionals now pay out 20 more points for a win and are more generous down the top cut places, which can only be good news for those of you going for Worlds invites. The table on your screen details the exact layout for championship points given out, including kickers depending on attendance numbers too. These differences are part of the changes made in light of last season's trial run, and it looks like they're all pretty good. Now that that's out of the way, let's go on to the main part of the episode, my top 5 decks for regionals this time around. This list is going to be just my personal opinion, so don't be offended if your particular choice isn't on that list. If it isn't on the list, that doesn't make it a bad play for regionals. The decks included in the top 5 are just going to be the predicted most popular and best performing decks for the series. Let's get straight into it with number 5, which I've chosen to be Ho-Oh EX. This deck made a huge splash in the meta at Battle Roads, as not many people took this card very seriously after its release in Dragons Exalted. However, it quickly made its way into a very unique deck and has started to cement itself in at least tier 2 in the current format. So I say it's in at least tier 2, so why is it stuck into my top 5? Well, I believe it's actually a pretty good call at the moment, as you can switch up the attackers to predict your metagame well, and with a good running with the deck, you can clinch that top cut spot and those championship points. With regionals, you can afford a couple of losses and still make the cut, unlike Battle Roads, so I believe that Ho-Oh definitely has a chance of doing well this time around. For those of you that didn't either see my Ho-Oh deck analysis episode or just want to see an updated list for the deck for something to start from, then here you go. This list has been made to be as consistent as possible, which is what you're going to need at events as large as regionals, but Ho-Oh is always going to need a little bit of luck to get going quickly. The main decision you're going to need to make are the attackers that you want to use against your specific metagame. In my previous list shown to you guys, I had a variety of different attackers, but through further testing, I found that just focusing on 1 or 2 attackers is the best way to go to keep as fast and as devastating as possible. However, one of these attackers absolutely must be Terrakion. The best part about Ho-Oh is that you can fully utilise the surprise factor of Terrakion, where getting it fully set up in just a single turn can swing the tide of a game completely. That paired with its amazing typing against the rest of the format, mainly Darkrai, means you pretty much can't afford not to play it. The other attackers is where you have the option. I'm quite a big fan of Mewtwo at the moment, with Tornadus also being a great option, although notably weaker against Eels, as you would expect. However, Ho-Oh is doing well at Battle Roads and the builds have become more refined, so don't bet against this guy just yet. On to number 4, and we have Electric's first appearance in the top 5, first appearing with Rayquaza EX. This deck was a little overshadowed by the presence of Darkrai at the start of the new format, but this guy has certainly made a name for itself by becoming one of the top winning decks at Battle Roads so far. The availability for people to play the most optimum lists of this deck has increased since the Dragon Vault promo, and Set Rayquaza is now ready to be played, meaning it's more widely available to those who want to be using it. Here is an updated list for those of you looking to test against it or try it out for yourselves, and I'd say that this was close to as consistent as I can get right now. We have a 3-2 split on the Rayquazas featured as attackers, with the large number in favour of the EX, as this is your most versatile and easy to access attacker of the two. I've also included 2 secret Rayquazas, or normal ones if you get them from Dragon Vault, and this should not only help you to get really strong early damage on the board, but give you quite a nice backup attacker for later on too with its attack, Shred. Shred does exactly the same on this Rayquaza as it does on Giratina EX by ignoring all of the effects on the defending Pokemon. This is really important and is the biggest selling point of the deck, as you can knock out any EX in the format with 2 hits regardless of whether it has Eviolite attached or not. This is a very strong play in the current format, as all tier 1 decks have EXs as main attackers now, and this is made better by the fact that Rayquaza will only give up the 1 prize when getting knocked out itself. So pair this fact with the regular Rayquaza, which can take any prize it likes with the appropriate energy attached, Raikou EX that can snipe for a very nice amount of damage in any game, and the overall speed that Electric has, and you have an extremely nice contender here. As for the rest of the list, there's nothing out of the ordinary here, just straight consistency, with Energy Search splashed in at 1 copy to give you that versatility of grabbing vital energy when you need it the most. Rayquaza with its Pal Electric will be a huge contender at regionals with its raw attack power and early game speed, so definitely watch out for this one. On to number 3, where Electric joins the party again, but this time with its original crowd of friends, Mewtwo and Zekrom. This deck has been around with us for an incredibly long time now, and the lists for this have developed time and time again into a deck that has been perfected by many players, still taking it to the top. There aren't going to be many surprises when you are playing this deck, but the sheer speed and variety of attackers can tip a lot of matchups into your favour. Here is the most recent list for the deck that I have come up with, and feel it is fairly consistent. No tricks, just fast attackers that you'll get out quickly to respond to your opponent's board. Your 2 main players in the deck are Mewtwo and Zekrom. Mewtwo is still an incredibly strong card, even with a format full of Darkrai variants, as a huge Mewtwo can come out of nowhere with this deck, and when timed correctly, it can put a Darkrai player on edge with not a lot they can do to deal with it quickly and efficiently, especially if you have Eviolite attached. Another problem for Darkrai is Zekrom, a card that can hit for 120 damage very easily in this deck, and 120 is a magical number right now, as it can do the key thing all great attackers in the format can do, KO EXs even when they have Eviolite attached. An Eviolited Zekrom can 2-shot an Eviolited EX for 2 prizes, while Darkrai can only take a 2-hit KO back, tipping the prize trade in the Eels player's favour quite dramatically. Your other attackers include both Raikou and Zekrom EX, which are both great lightning utility attackers, as Raikou provides both the paralysis and straight up 100 damage to anywhere on the board, and Zekrom EX gives you a great attacker to deal with lone Hydreigons very quickly. Overall, this version of Eels has a lot of options, which makes for a great deck with a lot of speed, and I feel it has more answers to the current format compared to the Rayquaza version. Another thing to note about this version of the deck is that it has 4 extra ways to get Electric out of the active position, an inevitable thing to be happening during a tournament as it runs 4 double colourless. These extra energy just make your board and attackers a little bit more versatile and powerful, which gives it straight Zekrom Eels the 3rd place in my list. So now on to the 2nd place deck in my choice for regionals, and we have a Darkrai variant, which comes at no surprise as it is the most used card in the top deck contenders at Battle Roads to this day. Darkrai is just too good of an attacker to ignore, and this has been shown in the last bout of competition. This 2nd place spot goes to Darkrai Hammers. This version of the deck just plays 4 Darkrai EX and 4 Sableye and aims to slow the opponent down with crushing hammers, while you stay consistent with Junk Hunt and get fast Darkrai's onto the board. These 2 combined make for a great matchup for you and an unhappy experience for your opponent. Here is my updated list for the deck, and I'm a huge fan of this deck. And why? Because it's just so consistent. Sableye is a tool that not many decks can use, but the ones that can have such a huge advantage, as this guy keeps you as consistent as possible for the majority of the time. I have focused heavy random receiver in here to make sure that you do get a supporter every single turn, while you also get back crushing hammers to stall your opponent's start. What I also love about this deck is that you don't rely that much on flips going your way. Things are just a lot easier if you roll well. Aside from that, the list is just as standard as you can make it, which is what keeps it ultra consistent and aims to keep you at the top tables. Even though this deck doesn't boast the board versatility that Hydreigon variants do, it does boast in its ability to set up quickly and efficiently pretty much every single game. If you're worried about consistency, then definitely give this one a try. There are lots of things you can do with the list by doing things like adding in Terrakion with the appropriate energy and swapping around some tech trainers too, like Dark Claw. With lots of options and a crazy amount of consistency, this deck has made it as my number 2 choice for regionals at the moment, but we've got to my top pick still left to come. And here it is, my number one pick for regionals is Darkrai again, but this time with its best pal Hydreigon. This may come as no surprise to you whatsoever, but the strength of the deck cannot go unnoticed with the huge presence it had at Battle Roads previously. This is my top pick for regionals as I feel it is still fairly consistent as it can fully utilise Sableye, the strength mentioned earlier, even though it does rely on a stage 2 to get the strategy complete. The difference between this deck and any other deck out there, I feel, is that you can take control of games that seem to be slipping out of your grasp in just a single turn, by getting that stage 2 into play and keeping your field 100% more versatile than your opponent's. The intricate plays you can make with this deck and choices in the list makes it really fun to play, and the fact it shines in a format really shows how good it can be. Here is the list I currently have for the deck, and it's fairly close to the list that I won my Battle Roads with not that long ago. There are a few personal touches on the list, mainly the addition of a 4th Dino, as I find that you must be getting these down 2 at a time with the speed of the rest of the format. So what better way to do that than make sure you can search them out and draw into them as much as possible in the early game. By doing this, I have sacrificed a tech spot, but still have the one in there to change up with the one you like the most. An option I do really like at the moment is Mewtwo, as you can do what you could last format so easily with this deck. Win games by rushing your opponent out with a huge Mewtwo, taking a lot of prizes in just a couple of turns. Another solid option is Sigilif, who can make for really strange plays during the game to keep your opponent at bay for a turn or two, and Shaman EX is always there to make your Terrakion matchup a lot safer at least, or just sweep up matches that would otherwise be difficult to close out. Giratina EX is still a viable option for mirror matches, but I feel it has got a lot weaker because of the predicted rise in play of normal Rayquaza, which can take those 2 prizes very easily with its own shred attack. Overall, you all know I'm a fan of the deck and still believe it to be the best deck out there when fully set up, as it has a consistency options through Sableye and dominant board flexibility with Hydreigons and Max Potions. With constant healing and big attackers you can fire up in one turn, this one is definitely the deck to beat right now. However, don't get me wrong, this deck is far from unbeatable. It does have the strongest board control when it's set up, but other fast decks can just roll this one over when it struggles to get the stage 2 set up. I feel the format is in quite a healthy state right now and feel that stage results are going to be incredibly interesting when we get them. And that is my top 5 choices for regionals at the moment, or just for Battle Roads and general tournaments as the format stands right now. Hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I also hope that it helped you prepare for tournaments in the future. If you did enjoy this episode, then I would appreciate it if you could let me know by hitting the like button, commenting down below, adding this to your favourites, and as always, subscribing to my channel for all you need to know about the Pokemon trading card game. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you all have a great week.